Next week at this time, we'll be looking at Free Practice 1 and Free Practice 2 at the Canadian Grand Prix. A very busy Tim Hauraney still able to make time for his show, which is amazing because I say that and I'm not kidding. Tim, you've been really busy.
I've been really busy, Adam. Yeah, this is a busy stretch for me. Actually, I think I learned last year the hard way just how busy it could be by taking on too much. So coming into these first 2 weeks, I know now how to kind of pace myself for it because last year good. I think I cooked myself at the before I got to the end of the Grand Prix weekend. So it's been busy, man. Every day we've been producing content, getting content ready, lining up interviews, sketching out like what we're going to do throughout the week, where we're going to broadcast from, what locations, where are we doing things, and then been getting invites to events. And it's like you just can't do it all, right? Like I would love to, but it's extremely difficult. You know how it is, Adam, when you get really busy and folks want you at their events or they want you at their parties and
to be invited to parties. I can't imagine.
Yeah. Well, you know how it is. We roll big around here, Adam.
Sorry, that's right. You just can't fit our egos through the door. So, Tim, we are going to talk a little bit about the lead up to the Canadian Grand Prix, where it stands right now, a little later in the show. But right off the top, Joseph Newgarden on Pat McAfee. Let's talk about it.
I got a question actually first for you, Adam. So at the end of Joseph Newgarden's interview with Pat McAfee, so Pat McAfee, for those of you who are listening and aren't, I guess, from North America, Pat McAfee's it's a huge show that's on YouTube and also streamed on ESPN as well. It's streamed here in Canada on TSN at the same time. And it's a massive, massive program, I would say. And he had Joseph Newgarden on. Obviously, Joseph Newgarden won the Indy 500 first. Mm-hmm. I believe he was either the first or second to do it back-to-back, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know the correct stat on that one. But at the end of his interview, McAfee asked him about if he could race in Formula One. And he said, absolutely, any of us could race in F1 and we would rock it. Mm-hmm. Adam, what do you think about that statement first? When you hear that, what did you think when you heard that?
I think that there's a lot of truth to that, and now your body composition has to be different, right? You train differently. When you got to have bigger arms and a lot more shoulder arm strength because in IndyCar, obviously, there's no power steering, so you got to have a little bit more of that. And every driver that goes to that says that, but. It's interesting, Tim, because Formula One, especially, lately has been less of this, but it can be such a political sport. It can be such a money sport that a lot of the guys that don't end up there end up somewhere else, end up in Formula E, end up in IndyCar. And my question to you is like, what's the difference in the talent? Is it that much? Callum Ilott a couple of years ago was seen as one of the next big up-and-coming Formula One drivers. And all of a sudden, now he's not even mentioned when a seat becomes open, not even mentioned as a reserve driver. I think that he's right. I do think that he's right. And I think that's, it's for me anyway, it's another reason why we need a Team 11 and a Team 12 to get more drivers in there. That's what I think as an outsider. But what do you think as somebody who has driven these cars? Yeah,
I agree with Joseph. I don't necessarily think all of them would rock it. I mean, there are I would say, top 10, top 15, maybe top 20, and IndyCar would do extremely well in Formula One. And I think I think newer fans to motorsports or newer fans to Formula One may not understand that. They may just see F1 like, whoa, F1 drivers are the best. Well, yeah, they are the best, but there are other drivers who are also the best. Their timing was just off of getting into F1, getting a seat, having enough sponsorship, getting on with the right car manufacturer. So many different things go into getting into F1. It's talent has to be there for sure, timing as well, but there's so much else behind the scenes that goes on for you to try and get your foot in the door. Now, I was having this discussion with someone offline, and they were convinced that F1 drivers were the best and IndyCar drivers were like second rate. And then I'm like, okay, so to put this all into perspective, Patricio O'Ward, he's McLaren's reserve driver.
He is.
Zach Brown trusts Patricio O'Ward that if Oscar Piastri goes down or Lando Norris goes down, Pato will be there to jump in and do a good job.
Yeah.
Testing last year in Abu Dhabi, which Patricio O'Ward participated in, second fastest. Faster than Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. Just behind.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like,
wow.
So this, like, what I'm trying to tell you here is that, like, there are IndyCar drivers who are top tier talent and who would kick a lot of ass in Formula One. There's a lot of F1 drivers who already are top tier talent. That's why they're there, who could go over to IndyCar and do a hell of a job. Maybe not straight out of the gates. IndyCar is a really tough sport. It takes a long time to learn different tracks, different ways of driving styles, getting used to an oval, a super speedway. That takes a lot of confidence and a little while to learn. But I mean, as soon as a very talented driver goes over and learns those things, they're going to excel. So
yeah,
that's what I got to say about all that. I just some folks like, come on.
Well, I know that there's a little bit of, and there always has been a little bit of European versus North American here, right? Formula One, they went 10 years without a race in the United States. Remember that? Like, there was the very famous, I think it was 08 or 09, that Indianapolis race.
Yeah, there was quite a while. I don't know the exact number of years on it, but yeah, once they lost the USGP at Indianapolis, it was a very long time before F1 came back to North America. The closest one, obviously, would be here in Canada that they came back to.
Right.
But yeah, Adam, like a lot of your top tier talent, right, is coming from Europe.
Yeah.
It's not all in America, right? Like, I mean, Joseph Newgarden, I think he should have been in Formula One years ago. Yeah, I have made that argument since 2017, 2016. He should have gotten a test.
Who was the driver with the McLaren team who moved over in Indy, but he was supposed to be one of the guys that they were looking at to get in a McLaren car potentially, had they not got Piastri?
Well, I think, recently that would have been Alex Palou. So
that's right.
Two-time IndyCar champion. And then I think,
champion.
If I have this correct, Chip Ganassi tried to sue Alex because he obviously didn't want him to leave the team. Mm-hmm. And then I think Zach also, I don't know the full details of all this, but also tried to sue Alex because he wanted him in the McLaren team so he could eventually pump him up into the F1 team. So
wow.
A whole lot going on there with him. A very talented driver, though, right? Like, that's the thing that I'm trying to say here. Like, there are like generational type talents in IndyCar doing their thing. That's why you see, I would say over the last 5 years, we've really seen the weaker drivers who had been in IndyCar for quite some time get flushed out just because they just can't keep up.
Yep, absolutely.
The talent there has just gone to the roof.
I like the way McLaren is using IndyCar as a way to keep other drivers warm. There seems to be Zach Brown seems to come at this in a very North American way in terms of you have a franchise, and I don't want to call IndyCar a feeder system or a lower level professional league, but it's a different professional league that you can pull great drivers from. And he's got a really good lineup of guys that probably could jump into a Formula One McLaren car and do a pretty good job after a few races. Mm-hmm. And now obviously they're doing really, really well in Indy as well. But the whole point here is, I wonder when Andretti inevitably gets into Formula One if they're not going to do the same thing. And, Haas has North American ties, more NASCAR. But, do you think that Haas does that? Or why doesn't a Mercedes, a Ferrari look at that? And then you think, okay, well, but they do because they have they've got guys driving in Le Mans, like Giovinazzi, I think they won Le Mans in a Ferrari last year, did they not? Yep. And when you go through, and I hate to do this, but I'm going to quote this book again. If you look at Mark Webber's book, how many different series he went through before Formula One. So like he was a
lot.
Mercedes driver for years and years and years. I think he was a Porsche driver as well.
He was in DTM. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
He was in 24 Hours of Le Mans. Like he was in a lot of other series before he actually got his shot into F1. Yeah.
Yeah. So it feels to me like there's a little bit of there's still that we're, this is our sport and that's your silly American sport, and it's not the same. But as the Americans start to infiltrate Formula One, that wall seems to slowly be coming down with certain teams, specifically McLaren.
I love the fact that more Formula 2 drivers, when they don't get that chance to punch their way into F1, just because, again, not enough cars on the grid, not enough teams, they get that opportunity to still stay in open wheel racing. Because essentially, like, if you look at the ladder system now, once you're done with Formula 2 and you don't get that next step to F1, it's kind of like you're done with open wheel racing unless you're able to get a ride in IndyCar. And that's it. And like for someone like myself who raced in open wheel cars, like that's a tough thing to deal with, because open wheel cars are like, it's where it's at, man. Like that, those are just like, they're incredible machines to drive, and you're never going to drive anything that's anywhere near that ever again for the rest of your life. And it's like, you kind of want to try and stay in open wheel racing if that's where you come from. And so I like to see the fact that, there are F2 drivers, former F2 drivers even, getting a chance at jumping into IndyCar, just obviously seeing how difficult it is, because they rarely do they ever really succeed their first times out in an IndyCar. It takes a really long time for them to develop in IndyCar. But like we've seen Kevin Magnussen, when he was out of F1, try to take on some IndyCar stuff, and it just didn't go well at all. Same with Romain Grosjean, right? It's been an up and down thing for him, and he's still trying to get to grasps with all of it. Same with Marcus Ericsson as well. Teo Pourchaire just getting an opportunity now, and we've heard from Gavin before. They really like that kid. They think he's really good, and they think he's going to be something. So, when you look at it, I think that translates well for F2. It's same with that car compared to an IndyCar. IndyCar is obviously faster, but at the end of the day, I think it's easier for a driver to go from F2 to IndyCar than it is for a driver to go from F1 to IndyCar, because you're driving the F2 and the F1 car just they're not compatible whatsoever in any way, shape, or form.
They're not. And I think they're going to have to get more compatible for these rookies to come in and survive. I think Eddie Jordan was saying, he's like, Formula One used to be a young man's sport. And he's like, it now favors the veteran guys because the difference in the jump F2 to F1 is so enormous. And the time that you have to be successful in Formula One is so short that, like, you look at a Logan Sargent and everybody thinks he's the worst driver. He's terrible, blah, blah, blah. He's garbage. But Tim, you when you look closer at his times, he's getting better. He's improving things, but he needs, as you keep saying, 3 years to get acclimatized to this properly. Now, some guys like Ollie Bierman had one good race. He really did. One though.
In a Ferrari.
in a Ferrari too, right? It's a little different than a Williams. Which
he also tests and uses on the sim. So
Yes. And it's not to take away from Ollie, but
no, not at all.
He's great. One race does not make 23 others. And there's plenty of drivers that get a point or 2 or 6 or 7 in a Formula One season, in a race or something like that, if the cards go their way. But consistent points are very, very hard to come by. And a guy like Piastri is not the norm. That's a generational driver. That's a guy who's special, that McLaren was willing to risk being sued over because they wanted him so badly. Yep. But there are plenty of guys who need more time in the sport. And I think the problem with F2 is, like, there's no battery, there's no nothing. There's a lot of stuff about the F2 car that doesn't correspond to the Formula One car. Right?
Big time. Like an F1 car is always changing every year. Actually, an F1 car is, like, now with all the upgrades that they bring at them, it's it's almost changing like every other race or every race, depending how big the updates that you're bringing to the car. Like, look at McLaren's. That's B-spec car. That's like, they didn't start the season with that. Like, that's like, it's a massive jump. And as a driver, you have to adapt and get used to that quite quickly. And that takes experience. Or in, I would say, Oscar Piastri's case, someone who is just absolutely incredible talented.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And hey, by the way, I wanted to talk to you about quickly, if we're on McLaren for a second, Helmut Marko said that McLaren specifically have become the best at copying Red Bull. And so, he's like, because we're at the point in the regulations where, teams are getting better at copying Red Bull or McLaren at the most. And I get why he says that. I mean, McLaren has taught them in pace. The thing about the McLaren upgrades that are interesting, though, is it's being reported that they're working better than even McLaren thought. And the low-speed corner issues that McLaren were facing in the first few races are now no longer a problem. And this presents an enormous issue for Red Bull. Now, Helmut Marko is the snarkiest guy in Formula One, and you'll never get snarkier. But is this a copying thing, or is this an innovation thing? Do you think McLaren maybe has taken a step ahead of Red Bull, and Red Bull's going to have to play catch-up?
I think McLaren has taken a step ahead of Red Bull in certain areas. I wouldn't say like all around. I still think Red Bull has the advantage in the high-speed corners and long straightaways. Once we get to, we were talking about this on the pod last week, but like once we get to more traditional tracks, Silverstone, Austria, Barcelona, we'll probably see Red Bull claw back. Their advantage might not be as big. But some advantage at those tracks just because of the nature of the track. It's smooth and the corners are longer, higher speed. But when we get to different tracks where it requires curb riding, the tracks are bumpy, street circuits, a little slower. That's going to favor teams like Ferrari and McLaren. And I think for McLaren in particular, Adam, I think they've gotten to grips with that low speed mechanical grip. And how the car reacts to bumps and going over curbs and things of that nature. And I think they may have, and it sounds like it, they may have given up a little bit of that high-speed advantage. Because we go back to last year, we went to British Grand Prix. And remember, it was Verstappen and Norris on the front row. And we couldn't believe it, right? We were like, oh my God, like a McLaren is on the front row here, right? Well, I mean, it's because of that high speed content at Silverstone. A lot of really fast flowing high speed corners the McLaren's really strong at. And they may have given up a little bit of that advantage to get something else, right? So that's where that's where your payoffs are. I mean, you got to give something up to get something. You can never have a car like 100%. And in particular with this regulation, it really looks like you're giving up something somewhere to get it somewhere else. Like if you look at that Red Bull, I mean, the rear is not compliant with bumps. It's not compliant with curbs. And then you look at another car like a McLaren or the Ferrari in particular, really compliant with those things. The mechanical grip of that car works really nicely over those things. It doesn't upset the aero platform either when it does that, where that's what happens with the Red Bull. So I see what Helmut Marko is saying, and for sure, like all of these teams copy from each other, man. Like eventually that's just the way it works. But when we get down to the finer details, like there are going to be things that McLaren does differently than what Red Bull does differently, and that may give them an advantage at certain tracks. But I think this fight going forward, it's going to be a good one, man. Like I think Canada, and we talk about it at the end, but I think Canada could be a really good race for us to see.
I can't wait. Now, one of the things for Canada that we've been keeping an eye on, and there have been rampant rumors and just about nothing from the team, are Alpine and Esteban Ocon, and how Bruno Famin basically told reporters there will be consequences for his crash with Pierre Gasly on a just a very aggressive move around a corner. Which Tim, you said you said on the show that it's a move that you would consider as a driver, and I think because drivers are very aggressive. I read through some of the comments and the fans were like, I can't believe he would say that. I can't believe he would say that. And I think you have to understand the mentality of the driver. And the mentality of the driver, tell me, give it to me.
I'm racing. I'm not here to finish behind my teammate. I'm not here to lose a position or not gain one. Like, this is the sport. Like, do you want to score a goal or don't you want to score a goal? Like, what are we doing here?
Exactly. And I think that's what's so fascinating about it, because your mentality is instantly, yeah, I would do that. Now, there have been details that have emerged that Esteban did a couple other things apparently throughout the weekend that made the team angry, and then this was sort of the icing on the cake. And Bruno said he's the team principal. He said there's going to be consequences. People have taken that to mean he'll sit out in Canada. Now, that's probably not likely the case. But what do you think consequences means?
It could be a number of different things. I don't see them sitting Esteban for the next race. Like, that wouldn't make sense to me, in the fact that if you're going to put Duan in the seat, then he's going to take some time to get up to speed. And let's say the car works well at Canada, and you're going to have that separation between Gasly and Duan. And so that could be the difference of scoring, getting two cars into the points compared to just getting one car into the point. If you have Esteban in that other car, those chances are greater of getting both cars into the points. So that's why I don't think it would be a good idea to sit Esteban. Now, what could be consequences? Do you remember when Barcelona 2016, when Rosberg and Hamilton collided?
Yes.
And they both crashed.
Yes.
And I think it was from that point on that Toto Wolff implemented like a crash damage contract between the two drivers. If they cause crash damage by crashing into each other, they have to pay the bill. And so that could be, depending on like how big the crash is. I mean, Sergio Perez's crash, there's nothing left of that car. It's millions of dollars.
Yes.
So I mean, that you'd be. So now if I'm Pierre Gasly, and if I'm Esteban Ocon, you have got my attention now, right? Because now you're like, oh, that's going to come out of my pocket, and depending on how big our crash is going to be or how much damage I cause, it's going to cost me money. I don't have a lot of, like, I'm making good money. I don't want to just give it away for not really thinking through things. But if there is a gap and the car can fit and you're willing to give each other enough space to race, then I'm going to go for it. 100%.
Now, do you think that's Martin Brundle mentioned something about other teams looking at Ocon, who's out of contract at the end of the year? He's a free agent. He can go anywhere, and he's a great driver. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. This guy is a very, very good driver.
Yeah, they both are. Yeah.
Both of them are, absolutely. Yeah. And they unfortunately have been saddled with a less than great car, although it's looking better now. And there have been rumors that maybe he goes to Mercedes, or does another kind of higher end team take a look at Esteban? What do you think this means for how he's perceived by other teams on the grid?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, he's had problems with his teammates before in the past. I mean, in particular, Sergio Perez, and then a little bit of problems with Fernando Alonso, but that wasn't hugely significant. And now, obviously, putting Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon together, now, was that a great idea? I don't necessarily think so, because those two have history from years in the past. So, was that a smart move by management to do that? Right? Probably not. They probably should have looked at someone else. And so that's what I think about that part of it. But at the same time, it's tough. Like, when you see where Esteban comes from, and how hard that driver had to fight and what his family had to sacrifice to get to Formula One. You will do anything to hold on to it. And I respect that because you will not leave anything on the table. And that also means that your teammate is not your best friend. You guys aren't buddies, right? You're coworkers.
Yep.
But you're also competitors. You're also competing against each other. And you have to know where the line is, right? Where the two of you are going to establish that, okay, this is over the line, this isn't, this is on the line, and try and find that happy balance. And that's what you do with your teammate, right? And that takes time, and it also takes time racing each other. Trust me, I've had many teammates, so kind of understand how all of that works. And once you develop the respect between the two of you, then you show more respect out on the track. And I think Gavin Ward made a really good point when he was on here the last time, Adam, and that's a team principal for Arrow McLaren and IndyCar, who worked in Formula One for many years. He had said that once you get a great car and you have two really competitive drivers, he's like, that's when the real issues start to happen. And that's when you really have to figure out how you're going to separate these two drivers.
Yes.
Right? Alpine's obviously not at that point right now.
No.
They're not. But Esteban Ocon has been performing better than Pierre Gasly has this season so far. So as a team, you have to look at who you're prioritizing in certain races. And if you only have one upgrade, who's going to get it? Could that also be something that they penalize Esteban with, right? Like, could it be that it goes to Pierre Gasly first before it goes to Esteban Ocon? But another thing could be that they just don't re-sign him for next year. And they put Duan in the seat for 2025. And if so, where could I see Esteban going? I could see him probably ending up at a team like Haas.
Wow. Really? So
Yeah.
would it be him and maybe Oliver Bierman?
I would say so.
Yeah?
I would think that would be a good driver pairing if you can, obviously Esteban would have to understand part of his role is also, teaching Ollie Behrman.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people will be like, he's going to teach someone.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, okay. So his role, we won't say teaching. Let's say learning from Ollie Behrman would have to learn, like on the back end. How does he speak to engineers? How does he break down the car? How does he get the team to go in a direction with setup and then prove it right? All of these different things. How does he engage with engineers? How does he engage with the media? How does he engage with sponsors? What does he do off track? What's the training like? Just an experienced F1 veteran to learn from, in that respect.
Okay, and that's an interesting one because Haas has emerged as a very interesting team to a lot of drivers because of how competitive they've been. And Yuki Tsunoda's name came up in a couple of rumors, although I think you're under the impression that they're going to retain the same driver lineup next year.
Yeah,
right?
I think RB. Adam, I think RB holds on to both Yuki and Daniel Ricciardo.
So what would that mean for Liam Lawson?
That's the question. Like, what do you do? Like,
now if he apparently he's got a trigger. Now again, I don't know that this is the case because no one ever sees these contracts, but apparently there's a trigger in his deal where if there's no seat for him in 25 with Red Bull Senior, Red Bull, or RB, I guess, he can leave. And I wonder if that Williams second seat, currently occupied by Logan Sargent, if James Vowles looks at that and goes, man, there's a hotshot driver I might want to take a look at. Do they want to put another rookie driver in that spot when Valtteri Bottas is available? Does Mercedes want to capitalize on Red Bull and pull Liam Lawson over? There could be so many different places, but I feel like he's going to be in Formula One in 25.
Well, you would think so. I mean, I would hope so. I mean, again, right? Like we talk about the F2 drivers who, are strong, don't really get that chance. Lawson got that chance when Danny hurt his arm, and he did a great job filling in for Ricciardo.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, outside of that, it's like, okay, well, if Red Bull can't fulfill that part of the deal, Lawson's allowed to go elsewhere. And if he can't get a ride at, say, Williams, or he can't get a ride at Alpine, or he can't get a ride at Mercedes, which I don't see that happening, what does he do, right? Could possibly end up in IndyCar. And that's not a bad option if you're Liam Lawson. But again, it's not getting that opportunity to race in Formula One. It's interesting too, because it sounds like Sergio Perez is going to be retained for another year at Red Bull. At least that's what a lot of the rumors that have been flying around have been saying. And Carlos Sainz's name has been coming up at Williams. I'm not sure if that's Sainz's people putting that into the media or how that works. Like, it wouldn't be a bad, and I never really thought about it, but it wouldn't be a bad place for Sainz to end up. If he feels that the infrastructure there is going to change rapidly, right, Adam? Like, Sauber is in a state, and it's going to take a while for Audi to come in and turn things around. And that's a team that's going to struggle for a little bit longer. And we don't know what it's going to look like in 2026, where with Williams, if you can see a path, then maybe that becomes an option for him too, right? I think like Carlos is the biggest domino to fall first. Like, I think he's got to go first before. Yeah, I think he's got to go first, Adam, before everybody else can go.
He hasn't overplayed his hand, has he? Because, with Red Bull not going with Carlos, I actually understand why Red Bull is not going with Carlos. I don't think
that ever was going to happen, Adam. Like,
I don't think so either. I think they.
So I was sitting on this pod, like, yeah, of course you got to talk. Yeah, 100%. You're right.
But I also don't understand. Maybe I do. I think maybe it makes sense to just keep Max and Sergio together and keep Max in his happy place and not upset the apple cart for the last year of these regulations, and then anything can happen in 26. But it's odd to me. Sergio's had a good year too. Like, we should say that. I think that anytime he fails, like he has the last couple of races, you're like, oh well, yeah, it's over. But anytime he does well, people are like, yeah, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, he has been a spectacular driver on the grid this year, with the exception of the last two races. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, I get Red Bull holding on to theirs. We still don't know what Mercedes wants to do. Carlos, for me, is like, okay, if all the top teams say no, Audi clearly wants the guy, but they want him now. And if Audi goes away, then all of a sudden you might be, the seats start to dry up really quickly. And it is an amazing opportunity for him there, given what we've heard about what that potential contract could be. Because you're talking about being an ambassador. You're talking about a long-term deal with this team where you are the A driver, and Nico Hülkenberg is a good teammate to have. He's not a bad person. He qualifies well. You know that you're going to have support from your teammate if you need it. I don't know. To me, it seems like such a glowing opportunity. I know they've got technical things they got to sort out, but I just feel like, man, if it's a 2 or 3 year deal, it's Formula One. You don't get those.
Yeah, you're right. I wouldn't. I guess if I'm Carlos Sainz, I'm approaching this that I am the next best thing that any of these teams could want. So I'm going to take my time with what I'm doing. And I think when you're racing at Ferrari and you've been competing really well this season, which he has been, then I think that's when you can kind of say, I can take my time with this, navigate where I want to go, and see like who's going to have a better future for me to go to if that's what I'm after. I mean, I still think Mercedes would have been the best seat.
Yeah. Do you think that's not going to happen now?
I mean, it doesn't necessarily sound like it. It's starting to sound more like Kimi Antonellli may get a chance there, but we've been through like all of that. But it was interesting. I mean, earlier today, got a message from the Mercedes Mercedes team, and it was about a testing of previous cars. So that's where they go to a circuit and they basically let the drivers test older machinery. It's usually like, I think there was like a 2022 F1 car. I'm not sure if they're allowed to do the 2023 yet. I think there needs to be a 2-year gap between them. But that being said, the most recent testing of previous car was at Silverstone, and that was with Mick Schumacher, Kimi Antonelli, and George Russell. Mercedes says it was incorrectly labeled as a shootout.
Okay.
It wasn't the intention of the running,
Right?
And they kind of just said it was important to understand that each driver completed different programs on different days, different track and weather conditions, and it was just basically some of the reports that had come out that it was like a shootout for the seat or whatever were unverified, and it was just speculation that led to conclusions, comparisons, and all that stuff that got published,
Blown out of proportion.
Yeah, pretty much. So they're gonna be doing another one of these.
Okay.
And they're doing it this week coming up in Barcelona. And it'll be Mick and it'll be Kimi Antonelli, both in the car driving the W13. So that's the 2022 car. So it looks like you can only run the 2022 car. You can't run the 2023 car. But again, Antonelli is going to get another chance with Mercedes, get more seat time. So I don't want to say like it's going to happen, but if you're a young driver and you're getting good mileage in an F1 car, your chances of getting into F1 are greater than, not. So, I mean, it's good for him to get that mileage under his belt. And then, I guess it gives the team more time to see what they've got, right? To see if he would be ready. But again, don't think Toto Wolff's looking at handing out anything longer than a year, and Sainz wants more than that. So,
wow. Okay. Well, we'll see how it all goes, my friend. It's very exciting. Now, we're obviously there was a notable departure from Alpine, but this is sort of par for the course with them. Veteran ops director Rob White. Yeah. He's been there since when Fernando was winning championships. He's been there for 20 years. Yeah. And so, this name, if you're a fan of the sport, might not really mean that much to you. But Tim, I think it speaks to a bigger thing, which is things are not going well at Alpine at the moment.
So much turnover, right, Adam? Like
a lot of turnover. Yeah.
Like think about how much turnover we've had at that team in the last year.
Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Like, there's been so many key individuals that have been let go or left. And then you had Davis Sanchez, who left McLaren. He was there. He had a cup of coffee, and now he's down working at Alpine. And I don't know where you can go with that team, Adam. Like there are some reports floating around out there, unverified, but that Alpine could be looking at, or Renault, I should say, could be looking at selling off part of the team.
Again.
Yeah.
Because they did sell off part of the team already.
Well, I think this would be like a full see you later. Now, not necessarily do they keep the engine division running.
Well,
that would be the other thing.
The FIA president did mention that he thinks Andretti should now try to buy a Formula One team. What do you think about that? I mean, I feel like we're missing the point. If Andretti, first off, I would love to see Andretti come in and just piss a lot of people off. That whether they get an expansion team or they buy Alpine or they buy somebody else, I would love for them to come in with their American brashness and just drive people a little bit nuts, because I think some of the ownership in Formula One needs a little bit of a lightning bolt, and I think the Andrettis are very aggressive, and I'm excited for their eventual arrival. But Tim, they've built their own facilities. They have staffed their own people. So they go buy a team like Alpine, which already has its own facilities. What do you do? Like there'd be a lot of layoffs, a lot of redundancies, a lot of, are we getting rid of this facility here? Like, what are we doing?
Or you absorb all of it, right? You absorb the entire team. You absorb the entire infrastructure that they have in the UK, all of the personnel as well, which could be better than just building your like a whole new team. Like I think it would be a better option. I think you'd be competitive faster if you did that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're starting from ground zero, Adam, like just think of how much you have to go through.
Oh,
and I think like look at Aston Martin. They're a good example of a team that, as Force India got bought up, Racing Point had almost 400 employees, right?
Yep.
And since you've had the consortium that purchased them, and then Lawrence putting in the money, and same with the consortium, you're now getting close to 1,000 employees working at the team.
Yep.
But like, look at how long that took, right? Like it took, and that's just buying sort of, I don't know, what would you want to call it? It's almost like buying like half a team.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like here, you'd be purchasing a whole team, but you probably wouldn't have anything to do with the engine side, not unless you're leasing them or renting them.
Yep.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. I mean, I think they'd be better off buying a team if they can. I think it'd suit them better. That's for sure. They wouldn't spend as much money as well.
Yep. Which would be probably appealing.
Mm.
I would love to see Andretti in the sport, because I think it would upset the apple cart, and I like that. I love that about professional sports. It just makes everybody more competitive and snarky and mean, and I love that.
Adam, we got questions. We had
go.
a lot of questions from last weekend that we didn't get to, and then we've also got some recently. So Dan Kluboin asks, have you seen the Lewis Hamilton episode of Hot Ones? And when are we getting a Tim and Adam version?
We can do that. I haven't seen the Lewis version yet because, quite honestly, the last couple of days have been pretty busy. But I've heard it's really, really good. And you know what? The thing about Lewis is that every time I see him in an interview, I like him more. So every time he talks, I'm like, man, I really have such respect for that guy. So I'm excited to see how he handles some hot wings, though.
Could you handle like the hottest of wings?
I have done the hot wings or the hot ones challenge before, and I could handle it. Yeah, I love hot sauce. Yeah. It's not easy. It's your eyes are watering and stuff. But yeah, I can handle it.
I couldn't do it. I don't like my spice level only goes like so high, and then it just becomes uncomfortable, and you can't even taste the food, and I hate that.
Oh, you don't enjoy it. You don't enjoy it. That's not what I don't want to do.
I don't want. My stomach is, it's like once you get into your 40s, dude.
Oh, I get you on the stomach issues. I got them too.
Things
Heartburn
change
Central.
Dramatically for those of you listening. At NL66_ asks, do McLaren and Ferrari really have a shot at a basically the Constructors' Championship? Yes, I think they do. I think Ferrari does in particular, maybe not McLaren. They may be a bit too far away, but I mean, we'll see how things turn in their favor. But I really feel, Ad, and I'm going to keep saying it. Like, I really think Ferrari's got a chance here to win this thing. I know Frederick Vasseur has been like tampering down expectations like he did to me back in Miami. But I really do think that there is a chance here. Insider, so Jay Money asks, time to put all the rumors to bed about the topic all of F1 is trying to uncover. So I will ask the question, where is Monaco? Everyone is trying to find it, but no one can. I don't think it really exists. Is that a real question?
I don't know. It's in Monte Carlo. Monte Carlo is the city. I think that might be a Steve Dangle podcast reference. Too deep, man. Let's move on from that.
I'll take another one, and then we'll get out from Dan Klubine. curb riding, unsettling the car seems to be causing Red Bull more issues this year. As the pack closes up with the Canadian Grand Prix up next, will Red Bull once again struggle with this issue? I think they might, but I think also, Adam, like with Canada, you know, they have so many long straightaways. I think that's where they're also going to benefit.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
Adam, I still think I think Canada will be close. I think Red Bull will enter with the advantage,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to say that for every race moving forward, that Red Bull will be the one entering with an advantage, or the favorites. But for Canada, I think this could be like a Ferrari Red Bull type circuit. That's what I'm going to say. But again, we're not going to know anything until we see these cars on track on the Friday. So
No, you just never know. You never know, but it's exciting.
Absolutely, for sure.
Nice to hear McLaren's name in there. I'm just throwing that out there. It's great. Love that. Love that. Love that. I mean, listen, beginning of last season, they were finishing like 18th and 19th, so I'm thrilled.
Well, you should be if you're a McLaren fan. This is absolutely incredible. Like, what a turnaround. Like,
it's great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's been absolutely awesome.
We got another year into these regulations next season. So fabulous. Yeah. I love that.
We actually had before I forget, Adam, like we actually had a question that was put to us that I think you may have reposted that I said.
Oh,
that this
yes.
was a
And it
great
had
question.
to do with the wind tunnel and Mercedes. And essentially,
that's what it was.
Could Aston Martin's issue be a problem that Mercedes is also facing because they're sharing the same wind tunnel? And I thought that was a really interesting point. I didn't realize that because Aston Martin's wind tunnel is not online yet.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's from at LR Coet. So Luis, I think. Sorry if I butchered all of that. I would say like there could be something. There could be. I'm not saying that there is, but there could be something to that. And I think, you know, they don't share data, right? So the teams don't share that wind tunnel testing data. But I think when I look at McLaren, right, for an example, so McLaren uses that Toyota wind tunnel to build a lot of the components for the 2023 car. That really turned their season around. And then they're also building at the same time a state-of-the-art wind tunnel at their home base, which becomes operational in July of last year. And they start to put together this year's car in that wind tunnel. I'm interested to know like how much, how close those two wind tunnels are together in terms of, you know, like the belts. What can that wind tunnel do? How can the belts move? Are they on rollers? Do the belts actually move, or do they just fire the air down the center of it? Like, how does, and just see how both of those, like that Toyota one and that one in McLaren, sort of line up. I'd love to talk to Andrea Stella about that if he'd ever give us any details. But again, right, like Mercedes and Aston Martin sharing that same thing, and it's environmental that they're sharing. They're sharing the same environment. So that's where I think if there were going to be any problems with both of those teams in the wind tunnel, like it would be sharing that environment. Like maybe it could be anything, man. Like I always think of the belts. That's what I always think of.
Yeah. I mean,
just because
isn't that in Adrian Newey's book too? There was a belt issue at one point.
Yeah, like that's why I think that way, because I don't think there's only so much I think for a wind tunnel you can. And again, I'm not an engineer, but like there can only be so much, right? Like,
and it's very odd that Mercedes, with all those brilliant minds, haven't put a better car together. It really is.
And I think we'll get, and we may get like more of a definitive answer on all that when Aston Martin's wind tunnel comes online, and then they start, you know, putting a lot of their pieces and components into their wind tunnel and seeing how things change and shake out, because theirs is, again, it's like McLaren's sort of the state-of-the-art thing that they're working on, and which should also be coming online in the next few months as well for Aston Martin. So I think that'll be interesting to note, right? We'll see if there's going to be any jump for that team, which we probably won't see until, I would say, close to the end of the season.
Right. Right.
But it's a great question. It was a great question. It had me
really,
thinking,
really insightful. That was really good question.
Yeah, it was.
All right.
It was pretty awesome. Adam, big congratulations to your mom.
Thank you.
Tell everybody where you were yesterday, because we didn't get to record, but it's pretty amazing achievement.
Here in Canada, we have these things called the Canadian Screen Awards, and my mom has been on television for 40 plus years here in this country, and she won a Lifetime Achievement Award and actually won Best Host, and the show, her director won Best Director, and the show, which, you know, wrapped up last year. So this is for last year's awards. Won best show, which was great, best production. So big shout out to her and the team, and I got to give a little speech to honor her and you know, the career that she's had, and obviously she's still on in radio, but you know, it's been quite the career as a woman coming up in the 70s, early 80s. There weren't the same opportunities that there are today, I think, and so she went through a lot and smiled the whole way, and so it was very cool to see it. You know, full circle moment, being 36 years old, and you know, your mom's starting to wind some of the things up in her career, and you go, oh, man, like, yeah, this doesn't last forever. It is going to be over one day, and so anyway, I was very, very proud of her. It was an awesome day.
Yeah, what an accomplishment, dude. It's amazing. That's incredible to be able to take a career like that and expand it for as long as she was able to do, and be just so relevant within everything. It's just incredible, dude. Like, it's hard to do that, especially in I would say our environment, right? Like it's a very changing,
it's very hard.
Yeah.
Media's tough. Media's tough. Man.
And it's a great accomplishment by her. Like that's awesome, dude. I hope we get to see your speech, right? Like we get to see that somewhere.
Yeah, it might. I don't know if it'll make the broadcast, because there's so many awards at the Canadian Screen Awards, like for different, you know, sound design and sound this and you know, there's so many different ones, and it's documentary and it's sports television, it's news, it's reality, it's literally anything that makes the screen. I don't know what will make the telecast and what won't, but I'm hoping it does. That would be great for her. And you know, they're recording them all right now, and they kind of chop it up and put it into a show. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Big congrats to your mom, dude. That's incredible.
What
do you got going on for the rest of the week? What are you doing this weekend?
This weekend is my daughter's birthday. So I have a 5-year-old now, officially, as of today, and it's going real fast. So I think that we're going to have a really busy weekend. It's going to be a lot of pink sparkles, Tim. A lot of pink sparkles, a lot of running around and screaming and playing pretend with unicorns, but it's going to be great. It's going to be lots of fun, and then really, you know, back to work, because I also have 2 streams to do this weekend on the NHL side of the network, and so there's lots going on, man. There's lots going on. It's a busy time.
Adam, do you dress up as a unicorn and let the kids like ride you?
No, but maybe I should.
Like, come on, unicorn, we want you to go faster.
Do something.
Like, damn it.
They would. They'd climb all over me. Awesome. Anyway, yeah, it's going to be. I'm tired thinking about it already. Tim, I hope you have a great weekend, and I hope it's a lot quieter.
It's going to be a weekend, man. It'll be busy, but I'll enjoy it, man. But thanks very much for taking the time, Adam. Appreciate it, dude.